Yota Devices YotaPhone review, it's different. While smartphones these days are stuffed to gills with powerful technology, design-wise, it would not be far-fetched to state that companies are unwilling to push the boundaries. Look and feel. We really want to give the YotaPhone full marks for innovation for its design because it turned heads every single time we pulled the phone out of the pocket. People were curious about the second screen and we were happy to oblige with an explanation. The rear of this phone is made of 4.3-inch curved e-ink display, and if reports are to be believed, Yota Devices commissioned Corning to create a special curved Gorilla Glass 3 to be added for additional protection. Turn the phone around and things start looking more familiar. The nondescript front is dominated by a 4.3-inch screen, with copious bezels surrounding all the sides. There is a front camera and an earpiece above this screen. Below it lies another touch panel, like the one on its rear, which can again be used for navigation. A micro USB port lies at the bottom and is accompanied by a microphone. The volume rocker lies on the left edge of the phone. The power button has curiously been placed on the micro SIM card tray. It doesn't have good travel and feels very soft to use as well. On the top, one can also find the 3.5mm jack and another microphone. Dual displays. The main display on the YotaPhone is 4.3-inch primary screen IPS LCD panel with a resolution of 720x1280, which is really good because it translates to a pixel density of 342 ppi. It is a very crisp display with a good amount of saturation, but we noticed that the whites had a very warm tone to the extent that the screen looked really yellow. Specifications and camera. According to YotaPhone's official website and Flipkart's online listing of the phone, it is supposed to be packing a Qualcomm SoC, which is a combination of a dual-core Snapdragon 400 chipset clocked at 1.7 GHz with Adreno 320 GPU. We generally use a software called CPU-Z to double-check the specifications, and quite surprisingly it showed that the phone is actually using a Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 Plus clocked at 1.73 GHz. The model number it showed was QCT-MSM8960CDP. Incidentally, Yota Devices used the Snapdragon S4 Plus in the initial build of the YotaPhone. Also interestingly, Qualcomm's official website states that Snapdragon 400 chipsets can be paired with GPUs only up to Adreno 306. Therefore, the inclusion of Adreno 320 also makes the situation slightly murky. We got a confirmation from Jumbo Electronics that the phone uses the MSM8960 chip, but the company categorically stated that it is running Snapdragon 400. In any case, we have benchmark numbers for our readers in the performance section and are awaiting an official response from Qualcomm. We will update the review accordingly as and when we hear from them. The phone has 2 GB of RAM and 32 GB of internal storage space, with no provision for adding more space using a memory card. YotaPhone has a 13-megapixel rear camera and a 1-megapixel front-facing camera. The micro SIM card inside the phone can connect to 3G networks and LTE as well, but it does not support the 2.3 GHz band on which the Indian networks operate. An 1800 mAh battery powers the phone. The 13-megapixel rear camera can take some decent shots in daylight. We noticed that the images are quite sharp and the software processing manages to keep noise at a bare minimum. Having said that, we did catch some purple fringing around the edges. Software. The YotaPhone is running Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean, which is quite evidently outdated. But, please remember that Yota Devices unveiled the phone in 2012 and at that time it was running the latest Android 4.1 OS. We are unsure if the company has plans to update the software to Android 4.4. KitKat or 5.0 Lollipop anytime soon, but it seems highly unlikely at this moment considering the YotaPhone 2 is already being prepped for launch. Performance. Keeping the benchmark numbers aside for a bit, we think the phone was generally zippy to use and it can even play the latest high-end games smoothly without any lags. We tried Dead Trigger 2 and Shadowgun, and both the games worked flawlessly, thanks to the presence of the fairly powerful Adreno 320 GPU. This is further corroborated by the GF's Bench and 3D Mark Ice Storm, equals 720p, tests in which YotaPhone achieved scores of 24.7 FPS and 9957 respectively. In an 225 and quadrant the phone managed to log 26,900 and 6,835 respectively. Please note that these numbers are indicative of the MSM8960 chip inside the phone. Verdict: in our opinion, the first generation YotaPhone is high on innovation, but the execution could have been better. Like we mentioned before, we like the e-ink display for reading books, but we wish there were more apps that could use the same. It's especially difficult to recommend a YotaPhone when a better device is around the corner, where Yota Devices is likely to address at least some of the shortcomings of the device. Despite the innovation, the first generation YotaPhone feels more like an experiment we cannot recommend as a purchase unless you are in an absolute urgency to buy a phone with an e-ink display and cannot wait for the YotaPhone 2 to hit Indian markets. The rest can probably pick up a Moto G, Gen 2, and an Amazon Kindle for the e-ink display.